All right, everybody, welcome back. I trust you've had a wonderful short time networking for those of you who were actually able to go out and do so in the Wonder platform. I'm interested to know what your experiences were in doing that. I certainly went around there, and it really does somehow simulate the actual networking process that we would do if we were in the same room, basically. So that is networking virtually in the time of the pandemic. And I always wonder, we've talked about the fact that we're not going to be going back to the normal, right? What we used to call the good old days or whatever, because everything's going to be very different after the pandemic. And I just wonder how much more virtual life is going to be post COVID-19. But certainly, welcome back to everybody. And thank you so much for coming back. I can see many of you gradually streaming back onto the platform. I hope that the workshops that you had the opportunity to attend were meaningful, that your conversations left you with more ideas rather than questions. I certainly was bouncing around in each of them, and I found them absolutely meaningful. So we are getting to the latter part and approaching the close of this conference, but yet still more to do before we do that. So one of the things we'll be doing in this part of the day is, of course, getting your feedback from those conferences. But I just do want to point out that as per the normal, and as has been happening throughout this conference, we are having the sign interpretation. My colleague Natasha is next to me, and she is giving us the translation in international sign. So thank you to Natasha, and I know later we'll see Romy taking over as well. And of course, for those of you who are French speaking, we have this conference being translated into French. For those who might be joining us for the first time now, at the bottom of your screen, that global icon, click on that and you will be able to access the different language translations. So, and that will be brought to us by Aurora and Monica. Those are our French translators. So thank you, everybody. Now that we've got that out of the way, I want to introduce to you now our next speaker, because we have on, and if he can now fire up his video, that is Dr. Sattler. He is coming to us as the Director General, there you go, Dr. Jürgen Sattler. He is the Director General of International Development and Climate Policy at the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, what would locally be called the BMZ. And he is just going to be giving us some of his takeaways. He's going to be talking to us specifically about the role that the African-European partnership can play in the fight against climate change, and giving us a good sense of what Germany's contribution is. So it's good to see you, Dr. Sattler. I'm now going to hand over the floor to you.
Thanks a lot, and thanks for having me. Yes, I mean, one could say Africa, small population, living and working on a low level, not so much developed, not issuing so much greenhouse gases. So what are we talking about? And it's true that Africa currently is only issuing about 4% of the global greenhouse gases. But this will probably change rapidly. Africa has a population, I think, of some 1.3 billion. This will increase rapidly, double probably until 2050. About 600 million people in Africa do not have access to electricity at the moment. So these factors together will probably make Africa a major polluter in 2050 if we do not act. And the estimate is that the share of Africa's pollution, greenhouse gas-wise, will increase to 10% in 2050. So in a way, we are at a crossroads now. First, I think we could all observe that renewable energy becomes competitive in most of the countries. It's the least cost. I will come back to that point. Then we can see that the markets, as people used to say, the markets start to react, and private investments some go out of brown investments. There's an increasing awareness that investments in brown industries and electricity sources are prone to stranded assets. And another factor is that we are now, I think you mentioned the issue building back better. We are at a point in time where we are investing. There are more public funds going to Africa, and there is debt relief. So there is an opportunity, and there's also an opportunity because Africa has the highest energy potential all over the world, 1,000 times greater than the projected electricity demand in 2040, in fact. So there's a high potential to explore this renewable energy. So that's one relevance. The other one is you have certainly heard about this compensation business. So industrialized countries and industries are trying to compensate. And this means that we can soak out greenhouse gases from the atmosphere, for example, by planting trees, but also by planting mangroves, very efficient seagrass, and all kinds of things, carbon sinks. And there Africa has a huge potential. So in a way, that's a business model. And therefore, Africa is another reason why Africa is so important. But it's not only about positive things and potential. There are also challenges. And we know that in order to explore renewables, we have to face the problem of the base load, the storage of energy. The policy frameworks are not adequate. So it's not automatic. There's a huge potential. We have to explore it, but it's not automatic. And what does Germany do? I mean, we are spending lots of money, but also investing innovative capacities in solving those problems with our African partners. And most of all, we are working with the European Union. So we are about to discuss with Brussels so-called Team Europe initiatives, where we try to join forces in specific African partner countries to invest systematically in renewables, for example, in those areas, solving the baseload problem, storage problem, policy frameworks, and to do that together with Brussels and together with our European partners. There's the EU Africa Green Energy Initiative, which is very important in that context. In a way, what we want to do is we have our Green Deal in Europe, which has many ramifications, but we are aware that this is not only for Europe, that we only can solve this climate problem if we deal with others. And coming from a development perspective, we want to do it in a way, not just to put another duty on our African parties, but on the contrary, to do it in a way which opens up development perspectives for our African partners. And we know that there are some low-hanging fruits, and we perhaps will start with those. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Sato, thank you for letting us in there, basically from a policy perspective, an initiative perspective, coming through a very important voice here in Germany, as I had introduced him. So Dr. Sato is going to stick around because we will have him listen to the feedback from the workshops, and he is going to be taking notes while his camera is off with his microphone muted. He is behind the scenes taking notes now on what has been discussed in our workshop. So I'm going to be now asking for Lillian to fire up a video. Lillian is going to be reporting back for workshop number 1. This was talking about shaping energy cooperation in Africa to leapfrog towards 100% renewable energies. Now, I just want you guys to touch on, specifically Lillian, starting with you, essentially give us a sense of what was the number 1 priority in your respective area, right? So bring it down to that. Tell us what should be focused on in terms of African-European climate cooperation. And most importantly, do you perhaps have anything that the German government could take away in terms of helping to implement that? So over to you, Lillian. Okay, Lillian, you just want to start by unmuting yourself? There we go.
Thank you. Thank you. So thank you so much, Christine. So reporting for workshop number 1, for us, the key priorities are that any efforts or initiatives that are aimed at accelerating renewable energy in Africa should be Africa-led, Africa-owned, and Africa-driven. And they should also be characterized by maximum interaction of civil society. And during the discussion, we had a number of initiatives presented, including the newly proposed EU-Africa Green Energy Initiative. And we believe that the boldness and aspiration that already exists in the already existing initiatives in Africa can guide the new initiative, the EU-Africa Green Initiative going forward, and provide the kind of leadership that Africa needs to address both the climate crisis as well as the energy crisis. And we believe that the goals, principles, and aspirations, especially those outlined within the Africa Renewable Energy Initiatives that is already in a sad state, can be adopted, to move forward the new initiative. And we want for the civil society, experts, academia, social movements to lead the work, including being able to work closely with governments. And because the civil society has a double role, both as generators of ideas and also as watchdogs. So they have this important role to play in the process. And we believe that by adopting this process, we can pave the way to address, both crises, the climate crisis and the energy and development crisis. And we also believe that having such kind of African leadership can create moral pressure for other regions of the world, to do the same and follow in the footsteps. And we also acknowledge, of course, the governance challenges in Africa, including the leadership challenges, And we believe that when we hold those in leadership positions accountable, we can be able to move any new initiatives and, of course, support the transition to 100% renewable energy. But the bottom line is that civil society is key in all this. Thank you.
Okay, that was workshop 1. Thank you for that, Lillian. I now want to introduce Simon, who's going to be covering workshop 2 for us, the hydrogen hype, neocolonialism or development opportunities. Over to you, Simon.
Yes, thank you very much, Christine, and good afternoon and early evening to all the participants. We had an interesting discussion in almost intimate atmosphere in a small workshop on this topic. And actually what we concluded was that the topic of hydrogen is new in this wave of green hydrogen for all the people involved. And actually, indeed, if you look at civil society organizations in Europe, they were very much focused on the question of getting out of coal, for example, and the positioning towards the issue of green hydrogen, how it should be used, how it should be prioritized, was something that only popped up about a year ago. And it was clear that imports to Europe, for example, are a key pillar of European strategies towards hydrogen use. However, if we look at potential exporting countries, there really hasn't yet been the time to formulate a strategy and a coherent approach that really puts the interests of the global south and the possible exporting countries at the center. And indeed, this was echoed by representatives of civil society organizations from Africa, that there very much is a need to first have this conversation, including amongst African organizations, to define such a strategy and then have an approach that really puts the interests of these countries front and center. Something that would be concluded would be extremely useful. If we look at some of the government activities in this field, you will see that the H2 Global Initiative, for example, has allocated 2 billion euros for import projects. And we concluded if you take just a few of those zeros, that's a number with 9 zeros, if you take very few of those zeros and actually put it towards facilitating such a dialogue between civil society organizations, that indeed is money very well spent and can help to really have a sustainable impact of these technologies and help formulate a strategy that is sustainable environmentally, socially, and economically. So much from workshop number 2, and back to the other workshop rapporteurs.
All righty, thank you for that, Simon. And so we're going over now to workshop 3, and I want to call up Sven. This was about more money well spent, climate finance priorities from an African and European civil society perspective. Over to you, Sven.
Yeah, thank you very much. And it wasn't surprising that we, in our discussion, really tapped into both elements of that headline. The one is about more finance, and then the other question is, of course, about how to better spend it. On more finance, I think we clearly came out of the workshop with agreement that the 100 billion climate finance goal still needs to be achieved. We are seeing a trend that, well, we're not seeing the increase of climate finance that we actually need to see. And one of those elements was around the lack of yet a German pledge to clearly increase climate finance. There's a civil society demand about doubling to 8 billion budget sources by 25, and that the G7 summit is the next upcoming opportunity after missing the Petersburg Climate Dialogue. But of course, we also, I think we're overall in agreement that there are a couple of issues to look into from a quality perspective. We noted some progress in the EU's approaches, for example, the commitment to include 85% of its programming that it should pursue gender equality goals. What was also raised in particular from the African colleagues was around greater civil society access and the need for civil society to play a stronger role in the implementation of such projects. Also maybe to counter some of the governance challenges on the African level, and as similar speakers said before, also to really have African-led initiatives. And I think there were some challenges identified in terms of EU-Africa relationship not always being the relationship among equals that are needed to develop true partnerships. I think these were the main aspects and takeaways. Of course, we had much more deeper and richer discussions, but again, to stress, it's both about increasing the quantitative aspects of climate finance, further increase to Africa, in particular in adaptation, and finding ways to improve on some of the qualitative aspects. Thank you.
Thank you, Sven. Over now to workshop number 4, and I'd like to call up Vera. This was about climate-induced migration, closing the risk gap. Over to you, Vera.
Yeah, thank you very much, Christine, and thank you very much to all the other rapporteurs. Yeah, we had a very fruitful discussion with very great panelists that gave insights into their specific perspectives from the national level in Bangladesh. We also heard from the African continent, as well as from the international climate and migration and also refugee policy. So it's really challenging now to focus on just one key point, but I will try. So from our discussion, it really came out that we need stronger connections. So one part would be the national and international connection, and also the stronger connection between different policy areas. So it came out that most important is to bear in mind that the situation of people affected on the ground, which is very complex, needs to be beared in mind to be able to make the international level policy processes and frameworks fit for purpose and really serve the people and the countries affected, where the discussion still identified some room for improvement. So 3 key points that came out were, first of all, that There are existing vulnerabilities that are exacerbated by climate impacts, and those are of striking importance in the discussion, as there's a strong need to increase the resilience of people to strengthen their ability to cope with the worsening livelihood conditions, for example, due to climate change and climate impacts. There's a need for more support, inter alia, for better access to finance in order to support the people and the countries most affected. And this is true for both countries of origin as well as host countries or receiving countries in the case of cross-border displacement or migration, but also, of course, there's a need to support countries where there's a lot of internal displacement taking place. And the third point then would be that we need to break the silos much more between the different policy areas and strengthening the coherence of the different frameworks in the climate, migration, refugee, disaster risk reduction policy areas in order to really strengthen the responses and help to close the risk gap still existing. And another point is also that we need to learn from promising examples that are already existing, for example, on the regional level. And yeah, those are all points we need to take into account or need to consider to really close the still existing protection gap for people who are moving due to climate impacts. Thank you.
Thank you, Vera, for that. Okay, that does it for workshop number 4. And last but certainly not least, workshop number 5. I want to call up Nicholas for that. Youth activism for climate justice. Nicholas?
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you see me?
We can hear you, but we can't see you, Nicholas. We'll give him a second over there.
I will try again.
All righty.
Okay, it's probably some technical problems. I will try to speak without, without the picture.
Okay.
Anyway, it's a great pleasure to share some of the key findings from our lively debates during this workshop on youth activism for climate change, or for climate justice. And the two speakers, Aissatou Daye and Mamadou Sylla, these are two young activists from Senegal. They illustrated the importance, but also the increasing visibility of youth participation in the fight for climate justice. They were speaking about the difficulties of youth activism in Senegal, but also worldwide. And then they pinpointed concretely to the challenges of participating in transnational African-European policymaking processes. The two speakers highlighted a number of specific demands that they had developed earlier in a group of young nature friends from Benin, Germany, and Senegal. And indeed, I think these demands resonate well with what Pia Yorks mentioned this morning on the spaces of participation for young people. So the first demand is to facilitate and expand youth participation, for example, by lowering the voting age and by increasing funding opportunities for projects by young environmental activists, but also, and this might be addressed directly to Dr. Sattler, by including young people in ministries. And secondly, the workshop called for additional possibilities of a dialogue for young people. There's a pressing need for safe spaces of transnational exchange between young people from Africa and Europe, or rather from the global north and global south in general. Thank you.
All righty, and thank you for that, Nicholas. Okay, so that does it for the summaries that we got in our workshops. Perhaps what we'll do now is I'm going to ask my technical team, because we do have some moments to spare. Let's perhaps go into our graphic recording and see what Anna has come up with in terms of our workshops and what she's been able to put down. And we'll just allow Dr. Sattler some few moments to gather his thoughts around his feedback on that. Okay, so there it is in terms of what we can see. So have a look at your screens now. This is the work of our graphic visual artist, Anna. Look at what she's done in terms of the different workshops that we were in and the messaging that she heard from the topics as well as the inputs that were made. I'll give you a few seconds to just take that in there without my commentary, because I'm sure you could be a little bit more creative than I would be. Don't know if you can see, but I'm noting the words high potential over there. And this partnership really has a lot of potential. Some of the things that we've heard coming through the conversation today. The man on the bicycle, which is got a solar panel there. That's a very interesting one as well, talking about making our transportation even more sustainable as well. Okay, so that does it. And I will remind you of the fact that, of course, you can access the link to see the work that our graphic artist has been doing throughout the conference. She's essentially captioned the entire discussion into the visual format, as you can see over there. It's incredible, and we're so happy that that is there for us. Okay, so Dr. Sattler, I'm going to put you back into the spotlight now because you were listening in and you were furiously taking notes. So I'm keen to know what your takeaways. I can see him smiling over there. I'm just keen to know what your takeaways were, having listened to the feedback of what was discussed in these workshops. So over to you now, Dr. Sattler.
Yes, thanks. Thanks a lot. Yeah, I was really furiously taking notes, and with all those notes now, yes, I'm completely confused. So it will come back. No, I would like to explore and elaborate on a few issues which have been mentioned. So the first one is the role of civil society, but also the role of the youth. I think these were from two workshops. So I really can say that for us, those groups and stakeholders are very important for different reasons. And one reason is that if you want to transform the economies, our economy, but also the ones in Africa, you need to have kind of driving forces behind. You need to have the stakeholders. You need to have the interest groups. And what we can see usually in such a transformative process is that it's biased. It's biased against those who want to build the future, because the vested interests, the interests you are seeing in a country are reflecting the current situation. And for example, the brown industries, they have their lobby groups, they have their interest groups, and they put pressure on the governments. So what we need is that other groups also make them hear and engage in the public debate. And there's civil society is important. The youth is very, very important, because what we have seen for example, now in Germany, I don't know if you all followed the papers, there was a kind of Supreme Court ruling saying that the climate law is not up to date because it's lopsided, it's biased against the future generation, the young. So we had to improve on this law. Therefore, I think this demonstrates that the youth has a particular strong stake in all that discussion. And therefore, the youth and civil society has to become more articulate, not only in our country. See, it's good that you have that meeting and you lobby us and we try to bring that in our cooperation, but it's even more important in the countries, in the partner countries. So that's one point I wanted to make. Then another group looked at hydrogen. And I think one very important point has been made, and this is the need for a strategy. Of course, I mean, when countries like Germany look at this challenge, there is always a perspective. Germany, I think that's legitimate. But you only can come up to the plate if you bring both perspectives together, ours, Germany, and the ones perhaps exporting or making available green hydrogen. And we know that all those are good ideas, green hydrogen, renewables, I don't know, I mean, for example, more agricultural production, industrialization. It's all good ideas, but the most important point is that it has to be part of a comprehensive strategy. The same point, the same investment can be good or bad, depending on if it fits into a strategy or not. Therefore, I think that's a very, very important point. Countries have to sit down and also with the different stakeholders and make a strategy. And perhaps they will put their priorities in other areas. Perhaps they will not go for green hydrogen. Not every country has to do that. But if they do, it should be part of such a strategy. Therefore, I think the proposal is a very good one. Not to me to judge, but for me it looked good. If we should then from the outside, for example, Germany with our development cooperation, facilitate this dialogue, I don't know. I think it's not excluded, but that's another question. And then another point, very important, the 100 billion climate finance and the lack of a German pledge. I think it was Sven who were mentioning that. Yes, of course, climate finance is very important. I would like to say the 100 billion doesn't make or break the success or the failure of the climate agenda. There are many, many other issues, but it's important. And industrialized countries have committed to finance the 100 billion. Therefore, I think it's important to come up with such pledges. Germany has honored its commitment. We have spent more than 4 billion euro this year and last year, more than we pledged. But overall, it's not ending up to the 100 billion. So there is a financing gap. And the question is, what next? So would it stay with the 100 billion or do we need more? So this is a new discussion. And I can say for my ministry and for the government that we are very open to this discussion. It's true that for the time being, the government hasn't pledged another number going beyond the 4 billion. But we are in that situation that we have to see what others are doing. We have to solve the overall problem. We have to have a discussion. We have to have a debate how to fill the gap and how to continue afterwards. And the Chancellor already has indicated that she's ready to look at that. So I think that's where we stand. We will work towards the COP towards the end of the year. And we are in intense discussion with our partners. I hope that we can solve the problem. I think these were some of the points the colleagues there from the working groups mentioned. Certainly, I didn't touch upon all of them, but I hope that at least on some important. Thank you.
You certainly did. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Tsatle. It's really nice of you to do that for us. I was ticking along as you were going, and I think you did a good job in touching base on some of the important parts. So, ladies and gentlemen, with those remarks, really, that brings us to the close of this conference. All good things must come to an end, and I'm sure that there is lots to be taken away from. Please allow me to get through my list of thank yous here, because you can imagine it's taken a lot to put this conference together and bring you all here. So again, thank you to our organizers at Venro and at the Climate Alliance. Thank you so much for the work that's gone on behind the scenes. I promise you there is a team of people that have been on the case for months to bring this to you. So a big thank you to them. A massive thank you, of course, to those who have been bringing this conference to us in the different languages. Thank you so much to those who've been doing the sign interpretation. We see Romy there next to me, others as well. Thank you very much. To also the interpreters who brought us the translation in English and French. Thank you very much. To our technical team, our IT experts, who made sure we were all visible and audible when we were meant to be. The breakaways with the workshops, things were flowing. A massive thank you guys for making this smooth and seamless. We're all sort of finding our feet on the virtual platform. We've been in safe hands. Thank you so much to the team at Vistafon. Also, a huge thank you to the speakers, the panelists, and those who contributed to the conversations today. As I said, I was jumping around during the workshops. I could hear you, I could see you. Thank you so much for those who gave the feedbacks from the workshop. Thank you very much. We appreciate your engaging in the way that you have done. And of course, to our audience, those of you who honored this invite, a massive thank you. We would have put this whole party together. It would have been a very big disappointment if nobody came, but thank you so much for honoring this day, for staying, for contributing to the conversation with your ideas, with your comments, with your questions. That really helped us reach a meaningful conversation. Now, I do want to ask you to do one more thing for us. We have prepared a survey, and I'm going to ask my colleague to now put the link in the chat for you there. We would like for you to just fill out the survey for us. It's going to help us in terms of our plans for the future, in terms of similar conversations like this, as well as topics. So if you could please fill out the survey for us in a moment. I'm sure there it is. There we go. It is your feedback on this conference. If you could do that for us via the Survey Monkey. None of your personal details are required for that, just your opinions about how we did with this conference and perhaps how we could do even better. For myself, Christine Mundo, thank you so much for allowing me to take over your screen. I know you saw a lot of my bobbing head today. I promise it's been a great privilege and pleasure for me. I have certainly learned a lot, and I can tell you from a reporting perspective, from a journalism perspective, some of the things that I've heard here, I will be applying into my work. And I know that it's important for us to understand. And as journalists, we don't always understand the issues that we cover, but I'm so grateful to you for making me understand this topic. But I think also as a young African, I'm taking away that there is a lot of encouraging things happening on the continent. There's a lot of activism, particularly our young people, who understand the time pressures, and these are the activists of our times, and they are going to be taking the message out there. But this partnership, we've come together today in the spirit of partnership. There are opportunities for all of us, and what the COVID-19 pandemic has done is, as we now consider our recovery, this is the opportune moment to start making and taking the right decisions, and doing so in solidarity. Climate policy solidarity, that is what this is all about. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a great pleasure being in your company again. Please fill out that survey, and we will definitely make sure to bring us all back together sometime again to discuss our progress. Till then, let's look forward to that COP26 climate that's taking place later in the year, and let's keep the conversation going. Thank you, and see you. Bye-bye.